Welcome to this flight of the Retail Pilot. I'm your host, Ken Pilot, former CEO and current brand advisor, retail tech investor and board member. I'm thrilled to share with you the insights from some of retail's legends and leaders, as well as my perspective on retail today. This podcast is sponsored by the following. January Digital is a marketing leadership company solving business challenges through consulting, media excellence, and actionable analytics for some of the most innovative, growth-oriented brands in the country, including Carhartt, Kendra Scott, Strivectin, and Steve Madden. Made up of January Consulting and January Digital, they offer strategic leadership services and full-funnel media planning, execution, and optimization, leveraging data to provide insights, yielding client success. Bluecore's software solution turns anonymous online shoppers into known customers and repeat customers. Bluecore enables retailers to personalize and optimize their email, SMS, and site marketing campaigns by delivering targeted and relevant messages based on where every customer is in their journey. Bluecore replaces annoying high-volume messaging with high-value messaging. Customers include Alo Yoga, Neiman Marcus, and Gap. On today's flight of the Retail Pilot, we have Tim Parr, CEO and founder of CADIS, an eyewear brand that crushes age stereotypes. He believes in defying our society's addiction to youth and fueling getting older and owning it. Tim is an entrepreneur who has also worked for some of the most respected brands, Patagonia, LL Bean, Filson. Tim has lectured at the Stanford School of Design, Modern Elder Academy, San Francisco Academy of Art, and the California College of Arts. In 2013, he formed a bluegrass band and hit the road touring the Western United States. Welcoming Tim Parr to today's flight of the Retail Pilot. Tim, it's great to have you on the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Ken.
Tim and I had a chance to meet a couple weeks ago at the Provenance Digital annual gathering. Provenance is an investor. I'm an advisor to Provenance, and Tim and I connected there. But Tim, your company is an exciting one. Love for you to take us through your journey from bluegrass to eyeglass. I mean, you've covered quite a range.
Yeah.
More on that.
Yeah, that's not your normal path, is it? So, yeah, I was a touring bluegrass musician, and long story short, I needed reading glasses, and then started doing some homework on what that actually means. How do you solve that problem? I thought it was the most broken customer experience that I had seen in 10 years. So at the time, I thought I could tour and start a company, it's right up there with one of the worst ideas I've ever had. So I would say a couple years of working on it and trying to do both, I then peeled myself off the road and started this brand called CADIS. So really it came from just a function of needing the product and not finding anything in the market that was appropriate. Yes, so.
And what prepared you to launch a business? I mean, you're a musician, you're a creative. Had you built, started, run any other businesses prior to CADIS?
Yeah, so I've only started businesses. So I had a bike company, a clothing company called Swobo, which was my first foray into business. After Swobo, that was sold to Santa Cruz Bicycles. And then I started a brand strategy consultancy called Parr, Goldman and Byrne. And that got me into this world beyond the brand that I had started of how do you craft messages and find ways to have people care about things that you make. It's just like the easiest way to describe it. So that's where it came from, background.
And CADIS has been around now for about 10 years?
Well, we've been selling stuff for only 6 years. I started working on it 10 years ago. And because it wasn't my first business and because I had access to all these other businesses and saw how the sausage was made in a bunch of different worlds, my check sheet of what I needed to be true before I started another one of these things again was quite long. So it checked every box, everything from margins to market space to, does my skill set Can I leverage it in ways that this market needs at this particular moment? Distribution, all these things needed to be solved before I flipped the on switch. So there was about 3 or 4 years I was working on it and we didn't sell it anything. And then it was that 4th year, I believe, somewhere in there, maybe even later. It's all kind of fuzzy. That's when I basically took my own money and bought, at the time, I don't know, $40,000 to $60,000 worth of inventory, not knowing what was going to happen. And thank God it all worked out.
And the focus of CADIS is on older people, like,
right.
So I'll put us in the category. We're the target customer. How did you identify that part of the market to be the key area for CADIS?
So when we first started out, it was reading glasses, and it's a lifestyle brand. So my belief is always, if you're going to be a lifestyle brand, you have to be authentic and you have to have transparency. Reading glasses are only for people over the age of 40. So when I was doing my homework, you'd have all these companies that would sell reading glasses and have a clear lens frame with someone 25 years old in the imagery selling reading glasses. I mean, completely broken model. And then scratching a little bit further, you realize that, the entire eyewear business is controlled by either fashion or action sports. So those are the two main buckets. If you exclude, your gas station and Home Depot eyewear, most of the brands are going to fall into either a fashion vibe or an action sports vibe. And what is more toxic to any one of those markets, which is older people. So it was a perfect opportunity to use this Trojan horse of reading glasses to get into the eyewear market in a space that no one would care about. People were used to spending $10, $20 on a piece of throwaway junk that they would put on their face. And it really bastardized the category, which is exactly what you should be looking for when starting a business.
The name CADIS, what's the origin and importance?
My favorite answer is it depends on who's asking. But CADIS is two things. It's my daughter's middle name, my youngest daughter's middle name. I have 2. And it's also a fly fishing bug that I got tattooed across the inside of my arm here.
Wow, nice tats.
Which happened prior to the company. So, it was, I don't give a lot of weight into names. I have a whole rant about naming businesses, and it just does not matter. What matters, I believe all names are empty buckets. And what matters is what you put into that empty bucket. Is Patagonia such a great name? If Google wasn't Google, would we think Google was such an awesome name? And Yahoo, or you can go through the list of all these companies that we would not care about the name had the company not filled the bucket with some awesome stuff.
Yeah, my favorite to that is Chico's, the women's clothing brand. You wonder, what name did not to go with.
I hadn't even thought about that, but you're absolutely right.
You can use that on your next name rant when you're out there. It's interesting. You've stepped in and really put out there to your customers, or as a brand for customers to own their age.
Mm-hmm.
That seems to be your sweet spot, your marketing ploy.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about the thought around that and the reaction to it.
Yeah, so that came secondary. So primary was the product. I thought product sucked, make better product wins, end of story, which is never correct. But that's how we start to begin these things. So what we needed, and this is all in hindsight, we needed a really strong brand position that made us get out of bed beyond, what I always call a sling and acetate. So why are we doing this? What's our why? And I had a meeting with a venture capitalist, understood the product. She understood everything, flips the box over. We have a quote on there that I put in the 11th hour because it was blank space on the bottom of the box. And I just had gotten off a conversation about 50s and new 40s, 60s and new 50. And I thought that whole thing was, I don't get it. So there's a quote on the bottom of the box about aging. And the VC looks at me and says, well, what's this? I go, well, I just don't get this whole 60, 50, 40, 30. Why can't we just be exactly the age that we are, because that is the most truest form of self, and it's authentic, which if you're a lifestyle brand, authenticity is a must. So right then and there, she said, you can't do this. No one wants to believe that they are the age that they are. Everyone wants to believe that they're 15 years younger, meeting over. So packing up my bike messenger bag, this was in San Francisco, and I'm walking down the stairs, and somewhat defeated because like this is probably meeting 50 or 60 or like ridiculous, because this is during the age of the unicorns and $0 to $1 billion in a month. So when I hit the street, it was like, oh my God, like this is the business that we're in. Like, to steal a phrase from Nick Graham, the glasses are the door prize to this much larger amusement park, which is age. And if I freak this person out with this comment and point of view, which kind of represents, my punk rock really upbringing, like that's the establishment. So it was this triggering of pattern recognition of like, okay, we just pissed off the establishment. And like, oh my God, this could be like the last remaining, punk rock thing that we can do, which is own age in a world, and specifically in a US world, where age is taboo.
And you had shared with me and the group that I was with out LA some really interesting stats on how big the plus 50-year-old demographic actually is.
Yeah.
Share more about that with us, because I was impressed by the number and it made me realize how big the opportunity really could be.
Yeah. These days, open up the newspaper just about any week and you're going to find an article about aging demographics and what the hell are we going to do about it. And there's somewhat of a global warming, head in the sand mentality about it, because it's so big and daunting that I don't think there's a lot of solutions that are being discussed at the table. And we're seeing it mostly in countries, Italy, Portugal, China, Russia, South Korea, Japan. Like we're seeing the demographics, the birth rates are declining at a massive rate. It takes, in order to reverse these trends, it takes like a generation or two. And what's happening, and I want to say this year was the first year, we have more people over the age of 65 than we have under the age of 18 globally. And that's a first. The US currently doesn't have a lot of these issues right now because we have immigration. So immigration has kept us afloat on this age discussion, which is why you're seeing, you probably heard of these. If you buy a house in Portugal, if you buy a house in Italy, they'll give you these citizenship opportunities. That's not like a welcome you to the neighborhood kind of thing. They are losing people at an alarming rate, and they need to supplement that with tax dollars and everything else. So it's really fascinating. So that's kind of like the background story. If you go up to 30,000 feet and you kind of look at it from my point of view, we are a demographic, let's just call it the 50 plus, that controls 83% of household income. I forget, like we are 50 some odd percent of the population. And one of the most staggering, or there's two staggering statistics. One is if over 50 were a country, we'd be the fourth largest GDP in the world, behind the EU, the US, and China. So that in and of itself is staggering. And then the flip side of that coin is if you look at what is spent on this demographic to extrapolate those dollars out of those people, 7% of marketing dollars. And what I'm referring to is really in consumer products. So you have 7% of marketing dollars that are going after the people that control all, that have most of the money. And it's been estimated conservatively at around $8 trillion.
It's the size of country that we would create. That's pretty staggering. That was, I think, the statistic that was a wow for me.
Yeah. And, you can ask yourself, well, why? And, ageism is probably at the peak of this discussion. And then it trickles down. If you go into boardrooms, let's just stick to the United States, it's mainly people in their 20s and 30s and early 40s or 40s. And to look at this opportunity, everyone wants to get the younger generation. And there's this belief of, if you get the younger generation, then there's lifetime value, and there's truth to that. But like what's being left on the table, and we've all been in these boardroom discussions or marketing room discussions where we have this highly articulated discussion around 19 to 25. We 3D map them with psychographics, demographics. And I remember very specifically back in earlier days and being some of these companies, first of all, we classified them as 50 plus. And when it was 50 plus, all we talked about was average household income. So it's like, screw the complexity of that customer or the differences or the things that they might aspire to be. Didn't matter. It was just understood if you had the 25-year-old or the 35-year-old, then the 50-year-old was going to aspire to whatever that 25 or 35-year-old would aspire to.
Let's shift gears. Let's talk a little bit about the business, where you are today in terms of size of business, size of company, and then we'll get into how you look to expand CADIS. How big is the company roughly in terms of revenue?
So if we're talking roughly, I'm going to say it's between 25 and 35 million. And we distribute online. We have, I'm going to guess, about 500 wholesale accounts. And we have 2 of our own retail stores. One is in New York and one is in Los Angeles.
And that one you just opened, I think, this weekend.
Yeah, maybe even like 4 days ago.
How was the weekend? This is in Abbot Kinney or in Westfield? Where did you?
Westfield.
Westfield.
Yeah.
The weekend go.
It's 4th of July weekend, and I was not disappointed by the numbers. And, with the heat wave, 4th of July, we just opened the doors. So pretty happy about what's already happened there and looking forward to whatever the future holds on that one.
Let's take a quick break with a word from our sponsors. Predict Spring is a global point-of-sale platform live in 22 countries. The platform includes mobile POS, endless aisle, fulfillment, inventory management, and clienteling, creating a true omni experience for customers and associates. Predict Spring powers Suit Supply, Converse, Lovesac, Decium, Janie and Jack, and Bouclair. So you have 2 stores, wholesale, online. What's the 36-month plan to grow this business?
Yeah.
What do you lean into?
I would say diversification is kind of the mantra, the drum I keep on beating. So we got into the game with reading glasses, and that got us a pretty strong cult following over the last 5 years. Those people also need prescription glasses. Those people also need sunglasses. So we'll stick with eyewear in the immediate future, but I believe that the brand could support other types of consumer products in health and wellness. Because really, when you take a step back, because of what we stand for, it's almost like an onboarding process into your, mid 40s, late 40s and 50s to where you feel good about yourself with health and wellness products. So taken from that perspective, you can kind of go into like, okay, is it skincare? Is it hearing, dental? I mean, you can go through all kinds of situations where people need different types of product categories. And if you can just make those life transitions okay, I mean, it's that simple. If you just make things okay, I believe we have a shot at winning at some other categories.
When you were looking to raise capital, I'm sure Warby came up with every potential investor.
Yeah.
What were you telling them that would separate you, age aside, separate you from a Warby and make you more successful potentially than they were? And I don't believe they're profitable yet, or they have a long time getting to profitability. And I think as we discussed earlier, you are profitable.
Yeah, we had a long stint of profitability, and then we consciously chose to not be profitable. And now we're going to be profitable again in the next, I would say, month or 2. So to be fair, we chose to go into deficit spending so we could take advantage of some market opportunities. But now we're getting back to normal business practices, I guess I like to call it. So what did I tell investors? I mean, if you say besides the demographic target audience, I can't exclude that because that's massive.
Right. That's a differentiator at Hello.
Yeah. I mean, Warby is a millennial brand by definition and younger. And they do a great job at that. And, kind of goes back to one of my favorite quotes is like, you cannot be a business case for something that you are not. So they have this really fantastic position with a demographic. I believe we have a fantastic position with a completely different demographic. So is there space for both? Now when you're talking about investors, there's investors that just don't get brands. All they want to know is, TAM and a couple of other metrics, and they don't want to know about the intangibles. So I feel that one of our strongest assets is our ability to create stories and live within the heads of people over the age of 40. So as long as we're concentrating on that and make the best product, having the best product is table stakes these days. To me, the game's being played in other ways that are intangible.
Elevating your brand, you've done some pretty creative things in the marketing space. Some things that are traditional, some things that are a little less traditional. One thing that I took note of was who you've attracted to the brand organically. What celebrities, what names, who's wearing CADIS that we might know?
Yeah, so I think what's important is you have to ask yourself, why does this happen, right? It's not flippant. So in order to have that moths to a flame action, you have to have a strong why. And our strong why is what got, you're referring to all these cultural figures, I'd put it at, into our atmosphere. So until then, it was just a strong design point of view. Now, when you accompany a strong design point of view with a very strong brand position and cultural point of view, like that's when you start winning. So because of that brought, I think the first one was Katie Couric, who tracked me down in Mexico. And to this day is one of my favorite people on the planet. And then the list just goes on and on and on. It's, Gwyneth Paltrow, it's Matthew McConaughey, Brooke Shields, Michael Stipe from REM. I mean, I could sit here and just blabble a bunch of names, and it's pretty remarkable.
And Tim, to be clear, you have paid them zero to
Correct.
Your brand.
Correct. That's a tool in our toolbox that has proven to be really helpful. And I can't thank them all enough. I mean, to be honest, they're all fantastic, giving individuals, and I just got really lucky.
Have any of them invested?
Yes.
That's great. So you've got, not only do you have them leading the look, but you've got them putting some point in the market, which doesn't hurt.
No.
Brand spokespeople, those are your evangelists.
That's right. And their support, I don't mean just support financially or support on Instagram. I mean, these people will send me a text and ask how things are going and like, what can I do to help? They truly support.
With marketing, what areas of marketing? Because there really are so many. I mean, I'll call it traditional marketing, which you could say is Facebook and Instagram, to, pop-ups and trunk shows. But what seems to be working for you as a way to reach new customers and grow the business from a marketing perspective?
In real life. Yeah.
And that's store strategy. Tell us more about in real life.
So I would say that at its purest form, it's stores. A notch below that would be like a pop-up, like we have one in the Hamptons right now. And I would say a notch below that, if we're doing a pyramid, would be like our in-home catalog that we send out. And that's not in real life, but it's tangible and it's real. And people hold it and they read it cover to cover because there's some storytelling in there and they get to soak up the brand in ways that you can't get online. So I would say anything that's tangible and real works for us now.
Your role at the company, I mean, clearly you have a great understanding of who the customer is. You also have a very strong design aesthetic and also a head for marketing. What is your role at the company as the CEO? What areas are you leaning into, and who's leaning into the areas that are not necessarily your strength?
So early in my career, I had someone who I really admired kind of pull me aside and say, you know how to design stuff, you know how to market stuff. Don't let that go. If you silo that out, like, it's going to be a waste of an opportunity. And I've never forgotten that. So I still hold on to product design. I hold on to creative director, and I have an opinion on marketing, but we got a team of people for that. So, but it's just, if you're doing a lifestyle brand, I feel like the communication with the customer starts with stuff and it transcends stuff into ideas. And the more that those things play together consistently, the stronger the company, to be honest.
How big is the company from a personnel point of view?
We're about 25 people.
And based where?
Nowhere. So
Rent on nowhere these days. Lost track of that.
You'd be surprised at how expensive nowhere can cost. So we've been remote ever since day one. So even before COVID, we were a remote company. I spend my time between New York City and the tip of Baja. So, and people are distributed East Coast, West Coast, Midwest, basically all over. So 25 people, I would say majority are in sales and marketing. I have a fantastic product manager who lets me design eyewear without having any type of eyewear design background. So, in order for that to actually happen, you need someone who really knows what they're doing. And I have that, luckily.
Where are you making the product?
Asia, throughout Asia.
And margins, I know the business fairly well, but the margins are usually pretty significant in the eyewear category. Is that true for you as well?
Yeah, they can be. I don't think they are what they used to be. And we use, a thing called bioacetates, which are pricey. We have our proprietary lenses, which we pour ourselves. And we make an expensive product, I have to say. We could do it a whole lot cheaper, but that's just not the game that we're in. Like, we came on the scene being the best reading glass product that you could buy. And now we want to take that message into the other products that we carry.
In average price points, from what I can see online, range from $175 to $225. Is that fair to say?
Well, for readers, they go down to $110 and up to what you just said. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. So $110 to if you get all the bells and whistles and transition lenses and this, that, and the other, you can get north of $200.
How is technology coming into play with CADIS? In terms of what you might be doing online or through production, or any way, shape, or form that technology is helping you advance / scale your business?
I mean, Shopify, I think, is one of the most democratic tools created in the last 20 years. That platform's amazing. And I think it allows entrepreneurs, individuals, however you want to define yourself, to go and start something and sell something and just get that sale. So for me, that's at the pinnacle. I would say over the last 2 or 3 years, I mean, personally, I'm pretty burnt out on platforms of the moment and social media and tricks of the trade. And, you read these forums or newsletters about what's the latest trick to gain a 0.25%, conversion and traffic, or whatever the case may be. And I'm a little over that. And I think that the future for our brand is old school, get in front of people, make people feel good, and get them the products that they need, which is eyewear.
It's clear that you have a unique leadership style, that not only in terms of your background, but how you view the customer, even hearing how you manage the business with 25 remote people. What are your greatest challenges as a leader today?
Oh, break stuff. I think it's really hard to make sure people don't fall into set it and forget it mentality. And innovation, probably with a small I, is really important to me. And creativity, what are some creative DIY ways that we can create and communicate and be more relevant to our customers. Like that to me is the hardest thing.
If you were to go back 10 years when you were first concepting, what advice would you give yourself?
Totally ignore speed, which I did, but the outside factors that were telling me different was insane. Like for some reason, we have this affinity for speed in business. I mean, of course, because it's attached to somebody's dollars and those dollars want a return on investment. But the fact of the matter is, like, if you are truly building the brand that you think that you are building or the one that you see the future of, it cannot be tied to a clock. It cannot. And I think speed is such a, I don't know, it's just the wrong god to chase, to be honest. And it gets people in a lot of trouble.
With your background as an entrepreneur, who are the mentors, or is there a mentor in particular that you have that's been your go-to for advice, for help building, for perspective on where you're going?
So it's funny. I was thinking about this just last week out of the blue. And what's interesting about this time around versus other times around, most of my mentors this time around are women. And first time around, it was mostly men. First of all, I thought it was awesome. And it was, I hope it's telling the type of direction culturally business is moving towards. So, I mean, if you get into who, Paula Sutter, who you know, is fantastic. Gwyneth Paltrow is a mentor. I think what she has done with Goop and her attitude and smarts is something that I look up to.
Your product is in Goop, correct?
Yeah. And, you know, prior to that, I spent time with Yvon Chouinard at Patagonia and lucky enough to work with him on parts of his surf business. So that was quite the experience.
You ready for rapid fire?
I love rapid fire.
Well, here we go. Okay. What is your favorite eye appliance right now?
It's actually the one that launched 1,000 ships. And I only wear 2 styles of our glasses, and it's the Miklos.
Who would you like most to show up wearing CADIS?
You know, I'm so blown away by who we do have, to be honest, that it feels gluttonous to throw more on it. But since we're rapid firing, I think it's pretty simple, and it would have to be David Byrne from the Talking Heads.
Who would you most like to meet?
That's easy. Isaac Mizrahi. Guess you didn't guess that one, would you have?
No, I would not have guessed. Like, I can see like some serious eyewear going on there. Favorite vacation destination?
Let's say Italy.
Can you be more specific, please?
Let's say Puglia.
Oh, love it there.
Yeah.
And if you didn't start CADIS, what would you be doing right now?
If I wasn't doing what I was doing, what would I be doing?
That's the question. Great,
I'd probably be back on the road playing music. Yeah.
Tim has been gracious enough to offer those listening a discount to CADIS, 25% off on your next purchase, and use the discount code PILOT25. This promotion is good through the end of August. And with that, we'll land this flight of the Retail Pilot. Tim, thank you so much for joining me today. Great story. Love the eyewear.
Thanks, Ken. Appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's flight of the Retail Pilot. And please give us a review on your favorite podcast platform.